And now I straight hand it over to Dr. Kelkar. I do not have the qualifications to introduce Dr. Kelkar, and hence a very unique and special request to Dr. Kelkar to introduce himself and the topic, and then bless us with his guidance. Over to you, Dr. Kelkar.
Um, I requested Prashant and Sudhir that I will introduce myself. The reason being that I am a cancer surgeon, and why a cancer surgeon should give a lecture on COVID-19 is something you all might be wondering, and even I would have wondered in different circumstances. Now, what has happened is that I have kept my cancer surgery ambition and career behind to start Dinanath Mangeshkar Hospital, because I thought we owe to our society something more than our individual technical skills. And that is the same reason why I am taking great interest in COVID fight, because I feel that this is a disaster like no other. It's something the like of which no country or no hospital has seen in their lifetime. And that's why I said I will introduce myself, because I have taken great interest in this topic. I have been to Sassoon to inspect patients who are treated there for COVID. I have seen and met many of the patients who are admitted in Dinanath Mangeshkar Hospital. Today we have around 170 patients of COVID getting treatment in Dinanath. So, and also I am interacting on a daily basis with patients who are discharged, patients who are dying, patients who are on oxygen, and patients who are being treated either in the hospital or at home. So I am in fact kind of heavily investing myself into this disease, which is COVID-19. And with that background, I will start my lecture about COVID. So we will start with the COVID overview. And I have named my lecture as War Against COVID. So we will start with the first word, which is war. So it's not a battle. Most people felt that COVID will come and COVID will go. And this misconception was because of China, which led us to believe that in 3 to 4 months' time, you can conquer COVID. And I think from our long history of association with China, we should have understood that they are not transparent. And when we now look at the Western world, we have now realized that COVID is not a battle. It's a long war, 1 year, maybe 2 years. So our war against COVID is an important terminology which all healthcare people, non-healthcare people, industry champions, educationists must understand that COVID is here to stay for at least a year or two. And all our strategies must be directed towards a long war. And to all of those who have not seen The Darkest Hour on the life of Winston Churchill, might be an interesting kind of analogy to look at it in the Second World War. We will start COVID with the very interesting history of Spanish flu. Spanish flu affected 50 crore people in 1918. That's a very high population for the population of world in 1918. And actually it started in Kansas, but because there were a lot of patients in Spain and Spain accepted it is a disastrous situation, it was called as Spanish flu. But the real capital of Spanish flu was India. And I am fearing that so will COVID be India will be the capital of COVID. Because in Spanish flu, in 1918, 1.2 crore people died. So 1.2 crore in 1918 is a very, very high number. And I was just going through the deaths. You will see that it was 12% deaths in Indians and 0.8% in Britishers. So 0.8% for Britishers to 12% for Indian was a great disparity, which brings to my mind, we will see the same disparity today in India, because you will see that the most of the deaths or a large number of deaths in COVID are in slums and underprivileged area of the country. So today, those who are living in slums are the Indians And probably we are the Britishers in modern India now. And I have a feeling that these people will die more than the people who are affluent. Of course, there will be death on both sides, but underprivileged people are going to die more, which I will explain later. Little bit about COVID-19 virus. It's a RNA virus. It's a nanomicron size of virus, and it's not a living thing. So we call it edge of life. That means on the boundary line of living and dead. The living things have a cell structure, have a viability, they need to take something, they need to throw out something. The virus is not like this. It is towards the non-living thing, but it has got a DNA or RNA strands within it, and outside is covered with a lipid capsule. And the main difference between non-living things is the replication. And that's why this virus is doubling. And now we are talking about doubling time of this virus in terms of 12 days, 14 days, 24 days. And mainly it enters through nose, mouth and eyes. This virus does not enter through hands, blood, your cuts on your body. So the only entry point is through the face, which is 2 eyes, 2 nostrils and 1 mouth. And mainly it forms a colony in nasopharynx, later on in the oropharynx, and then in the lungs. When it goes to lungs, it becomes slightly serious, and we are going to talk about what happens. In some cases, I would say about 15% of cases, there are extrapulmonary, non-lung manifestations of this virus. The two important modes of transmission, and I'm going to talk a bit at length about these transmissions because that is the basis of all the precautions. Number one is aerosol. Aerosol is current of air in which virus particles are suspended. Now this current of air where virus particles are suspended starts from the nose or mouth of the person who is infected. So for example, if I am infected, I speak loudly, I shout, I breathe or I sneeze, I throw out an aerosol of virus. And this can go up to 20 feet if there is no mask on both sides. So without a mask, the length of aerosol has been shown to be up to 20 feet. Whereas if you are using a mask, it is less than 3 feet. So this social distancing is related to mask use. Without mask use, social distancing doesn't have much meaning. So this is important to understand why we are combining masks with social or physical distancing. The second route of transmission, which is fomites, is debated all over the world as to how strong it is. But if you ask me my opinion, the way this virus has spread in 213 countries now is now affecting 75 to 76 lakh people within a short span of 5 months or 6 months. It has to spread both by aerosol and by fomites. Fomites are the particle which stay on the objects around you. So chairs and doors and windows and knobs and car handles and everything becomes an object where a fomite can launch itself. And this fomite spread, in my opinion, cannot be stopped. It's foolish or silly to try and stop fomite spread. That means somebody gave me a strip of medicine, then I have to clean that strip of medicine, then I have to clean the hand that gave me the strip of medicine, then I have to open the medication and clean my hand before taking the medication. So the fomite theory never stops. Everything you see around you becomes your enemy the moment you start believing in fomites. And unfortunately, the Chinese video which showed the trucks going on streets of Wuhan spraying sanitizers on the street, I think that's the silliest thing that ever happened. Because if you start spraying Mother Earth with sanitizers, all the living beings will come into kind of a threat. You can't spray everything. You can spray some of the things. So you should clean things around you, but should not get paranoid about fomites. Fomites, like going, if you go in an elevator, if you don't press the button with your hand, you press it with a pen, you press it with the elbow. Then how do you clean the elbow or how do you clean the pen? You are using spectacle, you are using mobile, you are using mask, you are touching the mask 20 times a day. So when you touch a mask, you are spreading fomites from that mask onto your body and then probably to your mouth. So I would urge all of you to think that it is not possible to stop fomites. It is possible to stop aerosol. If we differentiate this, our life will become much easier. So this famous mafia saying in American movie, it says that you can run but you cannot hide. So many people felt that if we go and hide in our farmhouse or maybe in New Zealand or in Iceland, we will be free from COVID. It is not possible. The theory that New Zealand is COVID free is true only till the time New Zealanders start mixing with the rest of the world. And when they start mixing, believe me, they will find out again for the second time what is COVID. So if you go anywhere and lock yourself up, hide yourself, stop your maids, stop newspapers, you are running, but you cannot hide forever. The COVID will come and visit you someday. So there is some inevitability about spread of COVID. It has spread to 213 countries and still we feel that we can lock down and stop this COVID is almost, to my mind, like a daydream. To reduce or prevent symptomatic corona infection. So my first statement was it is not possible to stop COVID, but it is possible to have a milder or asymptomatic COVID. Now to have milder or asymptomatic COVID, I have put 5 methods for everyone to easily understand. The first and foremost is sunlight. Now to understand sunlight, the sunlight and temperature from the sunlight will kill virus particles on or the fomites which are lying around everywhere that we travel. Whenever there is temperature which is high, which was there same so in India between April and May, the virus lives for less than 6 hours. And whenever the temperature is cold, like which happened in Wuhan and Italy and US, the virus survives for 2 days. So these particles remain infective for 2 days in cold conditions, in damp conditions, in non-ventilated conditions, and for 6 hours and less in well-ventilated and sunlit conditions. To support this, if you look at Goa, if you look at Kerala, if you look at Hong Kong, if you look at Singapore, you will find out that the virus transmission and the virulence of the virus has been very low in these areas. So why was it not low in Pune and Mumbai? It was because of the slums. Because in the slums, sunlight is there outside, but there is no ventilation and sunlight never reaches inside of the slum. And because of lack of ventilation, we saw this great spread of virus in our midst. The third precaution against virus virulence is exercise. Exercise and immunity are closely related. If you kind of look at your own life over past 30, 40, 50 years, you will notice that when you are not exercising, you are more likely to fall ill or have flu. And here we are mainly talking about a flu-like illness. We are not talking about cancer or diabetes or something. So when you are exercising, your immunity is good, your health is good, and the virus is going to be mild. Then the fourth thing I have shown is Jalneti, which is my favorite kind of child because I have been doing Jalneti for past 4.5 years to practice yoga or Ashtanga yoga. Now Jalneti is only a nasal wash. I don't use any salt. And this nasal wash principle is based on the fact that main entry of virus is through the nose. 90% of viral particles enter through the nose and 90% of the viral particles are thrown through the mouth. So when they are entering through the nose, they are arrested in the filter, which is hair and mucus gland in the nose. They stay there for a couple of days and then they start their onward journey. Now this journey goes to the nasopharynx and on the 5th day, we get our swab positive. So if we do Jalneti twice a day, morning and evening, it is likely to wash out virus. The water should not be hot. The virus is not going to be killed. It is only going to be washed out, giving you a milder or asymptomatic COVID. And the last thing I have shown is vitamin D3 to be exact, because we are not going in the sunlight in our modern life, and especially in last 3 months, we are absolutely sitting in our homes. Now this leads to vitamin D deficiency, and for a long time, we have established that vitamin D is related to our non-specific immunity. And when vitamin D is deficient, our immunity is deficient. It is not COVID related, it is general immunity like our exercise. Now, when vitamin D3 is restored, our immunity will be better. Government of Wales, that is, which is the part of England, has made vitamin D3 compulsory for all its citizens once the COVID started. So there is some sense in it, and it's not a drug. If you notice all the 5 things that I have shown you, sunlight, exercise, cross ventilation, water wash, and vitamin D, none of them are drugs. All of these are things occurring naturally around you. If we were into sun, like in old times, for most of the day, we would not need vitamin D, but we are not. That's why I am suggesting vitamin D. So these 5 things which reduce virulence of COVID are our friends, and we should look after them very carefully. Sunlight, cross ventilation, vitamin D3, gel neti, nasal wash, and vaccine. Now about vaccine, a bit we must understand that the best method of COVID prevention would be vaccine, because everybody loves vaccines. Vaccine is the easiest way of getting around the disease. One shot, maybe once a year or once in a lifetime, and you are free of disease. That is everybody's dream. But if you see, dengue did not have vaccine, chikungunya does not have vaccine, HIV, AIDS does not have vaccine, common cold and flu does not have vaccine, swine flu does not have an effective vaccine. So if it SARS, MERS, most of the recent viral illnesses, if you see, do not have an effective vaccine. Hence, to hope that vaccine will solve our problem is like trying to win the war by just being optimistic. I am not sure whether the vaccine will be effective. It will be safe, of course, but it may not be effective. So don't tie all your hopes onto the vaccine. Just think that vaccine may not come, and prepare yourself for something that I am trying to tell you.
But you know what? She looks nice now after some days.
महिमा तो कल लेकिन तू फॉर्म में
Okay. So
महिमा इस पे
coming to the second set of precautions we are talking about, let us come to the most important precaution, which is mask. I'm going to talk a bit at length about mask, because I feel aerosol is the dangerous spread of COVID. And in order to stop this dangerous spread, we want to use mask. Now there are 3 types of masks: cloth mask, surgical mask, and N95 mask. Cloth mask is good for general people going around buying their groceries, going in the car, going out for shopping. They are very good. Surgical masks are good if you are working in a healthcare facility, visiting a hospital, going to visit your relatives in the hospital. Surgical mask is better because it offers 95% protection. And N95 mask also offers 95% protection. The only difference being N95 gives a better fit. And this better fit is necessary for people who are doing procedures, like doctors who are doing ENT examination, surgeons who are operating in the operating room, people who are examining throats, general practitioners who are examining patients' face. These are the people who need N95 mask. But otherwise, if you are using N95 mask outside of these settings, it only shows your fear. Because other than being scared, it doesn't mean anything much. The surgical mask also gives you 95% protection. And my fear is you touch N95 mask at least 30 times a day. And if you touch that mask 30 times a day, you are more likely to carry fomites than a surgical mask which is loose fitting. And hence I come to the important point of discussion as to what is practical and what is ideal. Now let's for example think like Mayo Clinic, which is using N95 mask for all workers. Now Mayo Clinic thinks that by using N95 mask, we will kind of have reduced transmission of COVID in our health workers, which is far from true, because in United States, 600 doctors have died of COVID. So if you buy a expensive mask and if you can live, US would have been the first country to live. And 600 doctors have died in the US, healthcare workers have died in the US. So N95 is not going to save you because you are going to touch it more. With that tight fit, you are going to feel choking sensation when you are walking, when you are climbing, when you are sitting in a car, and then you are going to fiddle with your mask. So N95 mask is good for procedures and for short time. When we are attending to COVID patients, we are using N95 mask, but then at that time we are scared shitless because we feel that we are at the forefront of war. At that time we are not likely to do something silly with our mask. That is why it is good only in dangerous situations, but for all rest of the world, surgical mask and cloth mask are good enough. Our Prime Minister is using the cloth mask. So why are our corporators and our senior doctors using N95 mask? I would not know. I think it is they are just plain scared. It does not add to their safety. If you look at some of the deaths which have recently occurred, like a surgeon from Calcutta who did procedure on a hip replacement procedure, he was wearing full PPE. Patient was negative for RT-PCR COVID, and both died post-operatively. The surgeon died and the patient died. Or else we have seen some people who have not left their home, they are dying. So your mask does not necessarily protect you from COVID, it only protects you from aerosol. And if you go to Lancet site or WHO site, you will see that the best mask advised for healthcare workers is surgical mask and N95 in only selected conditions. So please don't think that N95 is a solution to COVID. The second point, which is surface cleaning and hand hygiene, has gotten out of control in our country. And I don't know why it has gotten out of control, because it has become almost ridiculous or funny. The way that I have got a friend who is a urologist. Now he operates probably 3 days a week. He goes home and his wife does not allow him to read his newspaper for 2 days till it is kind of dried in the sunlight, and then it comes inside the house. Now this urologist is traveling all over Pune, seeing his patients, but is unable to read his newspaper for 2 days. So the surface cleaning has gotten out of hand because of extreme fear. I don't know about on WhatsApp University or lockdowns or what it is, but it has just become terrible. So in my society, we have one door which is for going out for people who are walking, and there are 2 doors which are for cars. Now, for some reason, our society chairman decided that both the doors should be locked during COVID period. And these doors are, not the total closure type of doors. These are grill doors where you can see on the other side. And I told the chairman that the COVID will of course come through the grill doors. And he looked at me with anger. So this blind fear about doors and knobs and biometric clearances and lift buttons and newspapers and milk cartons and groceries, I think it is becoming silly. We should not worry about surfaces because it is not possible to worry about surfaces. It is only such kind of hygiene is only possible in operation theatre only for a short period of time. When we are operating, we follow these rules and we can follow them at a stretch for 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. If we operate for 10 or 12 hours, we are literally exhausted at the end of those 12 hours. Now imagine the whole country trying to observe these rules over a year-long period of time. We would die of exhaustion. It is not possible. So don't keep on cleaning surfaces like crazy. Let the fomites remain there. They are not your enemies. Be reasonable about cleaning. Be reasonable about hand hygiene. For doctors, it is very important to wash hands or use sanitizer between patients, because as a doctor, I would not want to spread infection from one person to another. But in a house, if people are washing their hands every 1 hour, I don't think it makes sense. If you are cleaning your house 4 times a day with some sodium hypochlorite or bacillol, I don't think it makes sense. It is completely senseless. And you cannot kill viral particles like this. They're just too small. Physical distancing ranges from 1 meter to 6 meters. Now it has been shown with good number of experiments which are available on internet that if you don't use a mask, the particle can travel for 20 feet. And if you use a mask, they go less than 6 feet, less than 3 feet. So if you use mask, physical distancing makes sense. But if you have a crowd like we have in India, where half the people are wearing mask and half are not wearing mask, some are not wearing it properly, then it makes no sense, because 20 feet distance is not next to impossible, it is totally impossible. Even playing cricket or tennis, you can keep 20 feet distance. So, this mask and physical distancing is very good in a country like Japan, where everybody would use the mask in a very disciplined manner. And if you see Japan and Germany, you would find that their results are better than the rest of the world. The main reason being this mask with distancing. I would say in India, distancing is impossible, but proper use of mask is possible, at least to protect others and even to protect ourselves. One of my friends 2 days ago sent me saying that mask only protects others, which is far from true. Lancet has many publications which show that mask does protect you. A surgical mask protects you maybe over 85 to 90% of times, and a cloth mask protects you 50 to 70% of times if somebody coughs on your face. So it's a very good thing to do. But the lower things which I have showed, mails and newspapers and lift buttons and biometrics and grocery, they completely make no sense. If we can live without maids, fine, there is no problem. But trying to live without maids for 2 3 months and then calling them in does not make sense. This war is going to be 1 or 2 years, so pick your choice. If the maids come, the only precaution they have to take is they must wear mask when they enter the house or before entering the house, and they must wash their hands thoroughly when they come inside the house and before leaving the house. If you follow these two simple precautions, washing and using of masks and keeping distance, uh, especially between the maid and your old population at home, I think you are doing a reasonably safe thing. It is not possible to completely do away with maids and newspapers and lifts and buttons and biometrics and groceries and whatnot. Avoid crowded spaces with no ventilation and avoid unnecessary travel. Now, this is important for you because whatever precautions you take in travel, you will be exposed to aerosol. And I would suggest that it is important to travel with precautions, but maybe try and avoid it for the month of July and August, because these are going to be bad months of COVID in India. Once COVID is waning, probably September or October, you can start traveling again. For next 2 months, I would suggest keep travel to the minimum. Crowded spaces like a cinema hall or a music concert hall or a church or an auditorium where ventilation is not exactly good is to be avoided. If you are sitting in a car, put your car into external ventilation mode, not in the internal ventilation mode. And if you are traveling with strangers, I would suggest put the windows down. If the windows are down, your chance of getting bad corona might be less. So these are the precautions that you have to take. Some of them are silly, some of them are important. A balanced approach is what I would advise. Is that Salih? Okay, so that was a little bit of kind of funny thing about the masks. I am writing an article on masks, and this article is mostly humor article, not scientific, but mostly how masks reflect their personalities of their owners. So it will come to you probably in a couple of days, and you will have a good laugh. Coming to the now COVID spectrum of disease, up to 81.5% cases are mild and they recover at home. They are either asymptomatic or they are mild. Now, whether it is the figure is correct or not, you will never know because all 100% of population, it is not possible to test anywhere in the world. But these are kind of postulated figures from the experience so far. 13.8 to 14% are severe who need hospital visit, hospitalization, and maybe a week stay, 1 week stay in the hospital. And 4.7% are critical, of which 3% die. So I would suggest this is the group which is causing all this panic. The mortality in tested cases in Pune and in India is around 3.14%. When we say this tested cases mortality means all the people who are staying in Naidu and Balewadi and those who are staying at home are included in this percentage, and 3.14% people are dying. But if you look at hospital admissions in United Kingdom, 15% people are dying. And when we looked at our data in Dinanath, we have now treated more than 500 cases. 7% of people died in the hospital admissions. So for 500 patients, that is 35. So our mortality 2 days ago was 36. So for 500 people, we had 36 deaths, that is 7% mortality in hospital admissions. And the mortality becomes really bad, the death. In ventilated patients, it goes almost to 70%. So ventilation probably is a heralder of doom in corona. And now we are trying to see how we can avoid ventilation in as many patients as possible. These are the symptoms on admission. How would you identify corona at home? On my right hand side is NEJM study coming from China. And on my left hand side is our figures from Dinanath. They are exactly accurate. So we saw fever in 62.2% of cases, so more than 60% of cases. This fever is generally 99 to 102. It is of mild to moderate nature. It generally never goes above 102. And it generally does not reduce. It remains steady throughout the day and comes down only if you take antipyretic like crocin. And this fever lasts somewhere between 1 day to 10 days. I have generally not seen fever going beyond 10 days in most of the cases, and many patients come with 1 day's fever and they become all right, they are tested and they are tested positive. So you cannot say from the fever whether it is COVID or not. And very important point to understand that July is our festival month of fever. That means all the febrile illnesses in the world come to dance in the month of July in the country of India. So we will have dengue, chikungunya, malaria, swine flu, common cold, Kawasaki, Japanese encephalitis, and whatnot. So in a short time, next 2 months, we will not know whether fever is due to COVID or it is due to non-COVID illness. That is why I have given you some pointers about fever, 99 to 102, sometimes with chills, and generally remains throughout the day, ranging between 1 day to 10 days. The second symptom which we saw was dry cough, which was found in 45.9% of cases. Now this dry cough is without expectoration and it's a kind of rapping kind of cough, and patient feels irritated because of this cough, his throat is irritated. So sore throat and dry cough, which occurs 45% cough and 29% sore throat. So together, throat complaint is common in about 65 to 70% of cases. So that's a very important indication that you might have contracted corona. Fatigue and body ache is seen, myalgia and fatigue. in again a large number of people, almost 50% of people. And this fatigue is more than the fatigue that we see in our routine flu or other illnesses. People generally tell us that they don't feel like exercising, they don't feel like going out, they feel drained out, the body ache is there. That is the kind of thing which happens in COVID. So myalgia and fatigue is the third important symptom. The fourth and the most important symptom is dyspnea or breathlessness. That is most important because that is an indicator of something bad which may come later on, which we saw in our 500 cases in 26.2% of cases. Whenever there is dyspnea or breathlessness, you need admission, because if your saturation goes below, there is some treatment, if it is given in time, which may save your life. So the only lifesaver is people who come in early phase of dyspnea. For people who have come with fever, we don't offer them much, because the same hydration and crocin which you will do at home, we will also do in the hospital. But for dyspnea patient, that is the only patient who really needs to rush to the hospital. Then if you have seen anosmia and hemoptysis, that is anosmia means loss of smell. So initially many of our patients were coming from slums, and probably staying in the slums, they had lost anyway their sensation of smell in an acute sense, because there is a lot of smell around. But now the recent patients who are higher middle class, upper class, industrialists, they are noticing anosmia more and more, because their ability to understand these symptoms is more. So from 6.5%, I feel it will travel to 15-20% in time to come. Loss of smell and loss of taste in probably 15-20% in next 3 months, especially with the changing demographics of our patients. About 2% or 3% of our patients had diarrhea and GI upset, which was common in United States, but not seen so much in our Indian patients. Probably our Indian stomachs are stronger than American stomachs to have such kinds of viruses and bacteria. So I have talked at length a little bit about symptoms, because you need to know when to suspect and when to go to the hospital. Now the special pointers: if there is cold, if there is a running nose, if there is sneezing, it is not likely to be corona. It is likely to be flu or sinusitis. Generally, COVID or corona does not result into a running nose. It does not result into sneezing. It is not absolutely essential that it is true, but this is what we have observed in most of the cases. Fever I have already talked about. Excess fatigue I have already talked about. Loss of smell and taste I have already talked about. And the last and most important thing is cluster positivity. Unlike other illnesses, corona immediately affects many or most of the family members. It is rare to find a single member of the family affected. Most of the people who have come to us, most, not all, but most of the people have come in groups. So we had one Kachi family where 12 people were admitted from one family. We had another 3 or 4 families where 5 people, 6 people, 7 people were positive from the single family. So whenever you have a cluster positivity in the house, even for the mild symptoms, just fatigue, just flu, just cough, think of corona. So these are the 5 special pointers of corona for you to suspect. Now we come to a very important point as to when to do investigation. There are 2 investigations which are advocated for COVID or corona. Number 1 is what is called as an RT-PCR, or real-time polymerase chain reaction test. Now this detects the RNA which is there inside the corona and matches it with the control RNA which has been provided with the kit. So these kits may have been made available with most of the laboratories across the West, that is France and Germany and UK and US, and these kits come with a control RNA strand which matches with the virus that we have got inside our body, and if the two are matched, we call it a positive RT-PCR. Now this RT-PCR test is a nasopharyngeal swab which is taken between 5th and 9th day of the illness. If it is taken on the first or second day, invariably it will come negative. Generally, we take it after the fever starts because that is typically the 3rd, 4th, or 5th day of viral illness. If you take it later on in the phase, that is on the 10th or 12th or 14th day, it is almost always negative. Not always, but almost always negative. Because the viral load has gone down, the swab will come negative. That is why we stopped doing swabs at the time of discharge. When we started out in March, we were doing 2 negative swabs before discharge. Then in the month, at the end of April, we were doing 1 negative swab at the end of the discharge. And in the month of May, and especially later May, we have stopped doing swabs at the time of discharge because it is negative. There is no need to prove something which is already proven. So, nasopharyngeal swab is done when you are symptomatic, preferably between the 5th and 9th day. Don't do it in a panic. Suppose somebody from your family tests positive, think who is the index case, who are the others who have now got exposed, and which is the correct day to do swabs. If the corporation comes and does, fine, that's the government way. But if you want to do it on the correct day in the correct manner. This swab is positive only in 65% of cases. And 35%, that is 1 in every 3 cases, it is negative even though you are corona affected. So even if your swab comes negative, don't give Satyanarayan or start dancing on the street. You might still be COVID positive. Wait for few days and use the same rule which we used at the time of discharge. That is, when you become asymptomatic, wait for 7 days to resume your activity. So if you are tested because your wife is tested or if your brother is tested, you are staying in the same house, your parents are tested positive, then you better wait for 7 asymptomatic days before you really call this test negative. Otherwise, it's just a false negative. Now, there are no false positives. Why? Because this RNA matching is pretty accurate. The swab which is taken from your throat, when it matches the control RNA, it just cannot go wrong unless absolutely the laboratory is bogus. In any good laboratory across the world, there cannot be false positive. There will be 35% false negative. And repeat swab is done only occasionally, like our patient who is not recovering, who is serious, we do a repeat swab to find out if the virus has left the host. So that is the only time we do a repeat swab, otherwise it is done less and less. Now, should this swab be done before every delivery, every surgery, and every admission? And my clear answer is no. It should not be done because just think that India has a population of 130 crores. If we do a swab for every individual once, twice, or thrice during next 2 years, it will be 130 crores into 5,500 rupees into 3, which would be much bigger than the budget of India. So it is absolutely out of question to do community testing. I don't know what the courts and government is telling, but it is impractical and it is impossible. The testing can be done for people who are symptomatic. The testing can be done for a high-risk delivery, for a high-risk surgery. If I am doing a chest surgery, lung surgery, an esophagectomy, a surgery which lasts more than 8 hours, then is the only time of doing the RT-PCR test. Otherwise, even the surgeon, the anesthetist, the ward boys, the nurses, everybody should be tested for RT-PCR if you really want to play it safe. Now, whoever has the hammer, okay, drives the nail. So when doctors have the hammer, they tell the patient that without RT-PCR, we will not operate upon you. Why can't the patient demand the RT-PCR from doctors? And the same way, if you are in a court, you are not allowed to enter court today without RT-PCR because you need the court and court doesn't need you. So the court will insist that you do RT-PCR and only then you enter the court. If you want to go to a foreign country which does not have corona, they will say that do RT-PCR, without which you don't come to our country. But it doesn't make sense. It has many fallacies, and I personally feel that COVID testing is to be done only for symptomatic patients and for high risk contacts. High risk contacts are the people where a patient has come positive and his contact, which is his brother, father, the colleague at work, his assistant, his boss, who has other high risk features, which I'm going to talk a little later on. So two indications for testing, symptomatic and high risk contact. And the main thing about test is that the algorithm must be ready before the test. Suppose you have given the test, you are sitting at home and you are awaiting the report. You must know what is going to happen after the report. If positive, have you packed your bags? Have you taken your insurance? Have you taken your medications for diabetes, hypertension? Have you taken your toothbrush and your towel and whatever you things you need in the hospital? Have you told your relatives what are the instructions when you are admitted? Unless that algorithm is ready, you should not be tested, or you should test the moment your algorithm is ready. So you have time to prepare. You have a symptom and now you feel that you are suspecting COVID, you need a test, you go to the hospital, your algorithm has to be ready before going to the hospital. Because more likely than not, the hospital will catch you, they will test you, and they will not allow you to go to home. Now, if they are not allow you to go home, it is better to be ready before you start. So, this algorithm is something I would like you to consider very, very carefully. When to get admitted? Only moderate and severe cases need admission. Asymptomatics can stay at home if isolation is possible. This is only possible for people who have an independent room, an independent toilet, and somebody who provides them food and everything without them contaminating the rest of the house. If you are staying in your room and eating in the kitchen or using the toilet or using the hall, then you are probably endangering everybody in your house. So isolation means isolation. My friend in Delhi, who is a doctor in Gangaram, she was telling me she is getting 2 or 3 patients a day in Delhi who have quarantine stamp on their hand and they have come to the hospital. Now quarantine means you will not come to the hospital unless in an ambulance. If you are roaming around in your car asking people whether you have COVID suspicion, that is not isolation. Isolation means circumstances as if you are COVID positive. That means you must firmly believe that whatever symptoms are asymptomatic, you have got COVID and you will not endanger others. That is called as isolation. If you don't understand, one of our residents in Dinanath, we asked him that you have facility for isolation. He happily told us that he has isolation. He was staying on a hostel and he was sharing room with 3 other people, not the main room, but the toilet. So our resident does not understand that sharing of a toilet is not isolation, sharing of kitchen is not an isolation, sharing of a hall is not an isolation. I feel that home isolation needs to be examined very carefully. Otherwise, mild and healthy people can stay at home. My friend in UK who works in NHS, he is a doctor. He was doing COVID duty. He developed minor symptoms. So he called NHS. They told him to isolate at home. Then he started having fever after 2 days. He called them. They told him to isolate at home and they sent him pulse oximeter. Then after 2 days he felt a little breathless. He called them and they sent home high flow nasal oxygen with instruction when to come to the hospital. He got better and possibly 7 days after that he joined his NHS duty. So that is what London and New York was doing in last 2-3 months. We are not on that path yet, but we might soon reach that in July and August. So mild and healthy people can stay at home with monitoring. And that monitoring is number 1, respiratory rate, and number 2, pulse oximetry. Moderate and severe cases must get admitted. Now these are the people who have high respiratory rate, oxygen saturation which is less than 94% on room air, and people who are not feeling well. High risk people with mild symptoms or moderate symptoms also should be admitted. Now, who are the high risk? Number one, people who are obese. Number two, people who have diabetes, which is possibly not well controlled. Number three, people who have hypertension or heart disease. Number four, people who have rheumatoid or any immunosuppressive therapy going on for a long time. And all of these people, whenever they suspect COVID, must consult hospital. And they must also declare in the hospital that we have got comorbidities. Please think twice before sending us home. Because hospitals also kind of are afraid of patients right now. If you see the fight between medical fraternity and patient population, there are two reasons for this fight. Number one is medical fraternity is afraid, and the second reason is, of course, economic. But the main reason is fear. So when you go there, you tell your symptoms, you please declare that you have comorbidities, you please insist that you need to be looked at by a senior doctor. What treatment you have to take at home? Mostly it is crocin and hydration. Brufen is allowed. ACE inhibitors, if you are taking for hypertension, are allowed. So actually there is no special care. Most of it is common sense. What you must do is you must do pulse oximetry probably every 4 or 6 hours a day, and you must do a 3-minute walking test, which I am going to explain to you, which we use it in our casualty. What you do is you walk for 3 minutes at a reasonable speed, neither brisk nor slow, reasonable speed, as if you are walking in a park, and after 3 minutes takes your oxygen saturation. If that saturation is good, probably you are not at risk and you can continue to wait. You don't need to arrange oxygen cylinders at home. If you are very, very smart or very, very rich, you can have either oxygen or oxygen concentrator at home. But I would suggest that at least in Pune, we have hospital beds for you. In Delhi and Mumbai, unfortunately, there are no hospital beds. So my friends who are doctors in Mumbai have already bought oxygen cylinders or oxygen concentrators depending on whatever they believe. The oxygen concentrator gives oxygen concentration at around 55 to 60%, around 55%, and the oxygen cylinder gives you oxygen concentration at 100%. Delivered through the mask, it is almost again same at 50-55%. In a mask delivery, it cannot reach 100%. On a ventilator, it is 100%. So this a bit of understanding about whether you should buy oxygen concentrators or oxygen cylinders. When you start reading in newspapers that hospitals are getting full, you can order online, or our hospitals will help you in getting cylinders or concentrators. Don't worry. We are responsible towards our community, and we will see to it that you don't come to a harm. What if you have to go to the hospital, what will you do? You first of all check for a bed before going all the way in an ambulance, which doesn't become available easily when you are suspected for COVID, and then going there and they are telling you that there is no bed, there is no ventilator, there is no ICU. That's not a good scenario. So always call the hospital before going. Always check for an ambulance availability. Many times I have read stories that they were told that ambulance will come, and next 3 to 4 hours ambulance did not come. You must declare that you have a COVID suspect patient before calling the ambulance, because the ambulance driver's life and his safety is also equally important. So what you must do, you must tell him that we are taking a patient of fever or throat pain or cough to hospital. We don't know whether he has COVID. There may be a small suspicion, so please send an appropriate ambulance. Or else your wife, brother, sister who is equally exposed to you and to COVID can take you to the hospital. And see to it that you are wearing mask at all times and you reach the hospital. When you go to the hospital, have a travel pack ready. Now this travel pack means for me, now I am wondering as if I am going to become a patient. So I will always take my books, I will take my yoga mat, I will take my tablet or laptop, I would take a food stock of things which I like, small types of food items which I like, and my personal items, my credit card, and my probably insurance policy. If I take all these things with me, because in COVID times, there are very few people who can come and visit you in the hospital. So it is best to prepare beforehand. And this travel pack need not be ready today. The moment you develop mild symptoms or somebody from your family test positive, keep a travel pack ready. You will kind of find great benefit of this travel pack when the time comes. When you are ill, like oxygen saturation falling or you are in shock, then don't worry about the travel pack. When the life is in danger, then you need not worry about these small things. Hospitalization, I have read lot of things. There was one article, WhatsApp post going that Dinanath is charging 8 lakhs for COVID package and Jahangir is charging 14 lakhs and Medanta is charging 18 lakhs. Now these are extremely silly and probably posts with malified intentions. There is no package, at least in Pune, to my absolute certain knowledge, which is offered by any hospital. I have heard about some stories from Mumbai, don't know how much they are true, but in Pune, there is no package. But the cost, if you have to understand, there is a rule of 5,000, 10,000, 20,000, 30,000. In a semi-private room, your total cost per day would come rupees 5,000 or less per day. In a high dependency unit where you are given high flow nasal oxygen, it would be 10,000 rupees per day. When you go to ICU, but not on ventilator, where they are giving you some drugs, which I am going to tell you later on, the cost might be 20,000 rupees per day. And if you go on a ventilator, unfortunately, the cost will be 30,000 rupees per day. Now take it for 7 days or 10 days. So probably the highest cost or for a ventilated patient would be 3 to 4 lakhs. I am talking about 95% or 99% of situation. And the lowest cost for a person who is staying in semi-private ward would be 20 or 25 or 30,000 rupees. So somewhere between 20,000 rupees to 4 lakhs is the entire range of COVID treatment cost. Go to any hospital. Anything above or below this range should look slightly suspicious to you. For patients who are poor, there is free treatment available because government has provided Mahatma Phule Jana Arogya Seva for them. So we get around 6 to 7 patients every day who come for COVID treatment to Dinanath, and they are not paying anything to us, and we are going to raise a bill to government, which will be a meager bill. It would be something like total 20,000 for 7 days, and for an ICU ventilated patient, it is going to be 1,25,000 for 10 days. So that's a meager bill government will provide us, but we understand this, that this is a war, and in the war, everybody loses. So my appeal to all the hospitals and people who listen is that this is not a time where hospitals should think about money. This is a time to save lives, and lives we must save. And if you hear any false news about any hospital, just show these prices to them. These are prices given by Dr. Kelkar, who knows about costing for a very long time. Are there any effective drugs against COVID? I'm not going to tell you much about it because it is actually none of your business, but I'm going to tell you a little bit for you to understand. Hydroxychloroquine is given to most Indian patients when they come in mild to moderate condition because ICMR has given that guideline. But the entire world is debating that hydroxychloroquine is not useful. That is because it causes cardiotoxicity and its role in COVID is under question. I personally am not in favor of using hydroxychloroquine at all. When we started out in the month of March, from our staff members, about 3,000 people were taking hydroxychloroquine. And I appeal to all of them as to think sensibly and show me some proof where hydroxychloroquine is used for prevention. And there is no proof in literature of prevention of COVID by hydroxychloroquine. And today, less than 100 people are taking hydroxychloroquine in Dinanath. So I personally feel no role of hydroxychloroquine in prevention and some role in therapy, at least according to ICMR. To my mind, it will stop one day. Methylprednisolone or steroid is used in the early phase of the disease and has given wonderful results in some non-diabetic patients. Tocilizumab, which is an IL-6 inhibitor, might have read or heard about cytokine storm. This is the storm our immunity starts because of COVID receptor and its action. And this storm, if it is identified in time and if it is blocked by this drug tocilizumab, it has shown wonderful result in a small percentage of patients, but nevertheless very useful. Remdesivir, you might have read a lot about Gilead, and remdesivir is not a greatly effective drug in COVID, mostly under research today. It is part of the WHO solidarity trial that is going on in India. People are trying to use it without trial, and that is only part of the panic. The first publication on remdesivir was that in a mildly symptomatic patients, in a placebo, which is no drug, only water or vitamin given, the total length of recovery was 15 days, and with remdesivir, it was 11 days. So for mild cases, it reduced illness by 4 days. So I would say that it has antiviral property, which is mild. I am not greatly excited by remdesivir. Low molecular weight heparin is because we saw many patients with COVID coming with stroke or heart attacks or with thrombotic episodes, that is called clotting of blood in arteries in the body. And if there is blood clotting, we use heparin, and that has proven useful in a small percentage of cases. Plasma therapy, to my mind, will not work, but people are excited about it only in India. Why I feel it will not work? Because plasma gives you antibodies which are called as humoral antibodies. And what we need in viral infection is cell-mediated immunity, not humoral immunity. So I have a feeling that plasma therapy is a fashion, and most probably, again in my humble opinion, it will go away. It will not be standard of care in another 3, 4, 6 months to come. What is most important possibly in COVID, probably the most important thing, is high flow nasal oxygen. That is what has saved maximum number of lives across the world. And this high flow nasal oxygen with proning, that means you are put in a prone position on your belly, has shown wonderful results across the world. So today our policy is to ventilate as less as possible and as late as possible. Previously people started making ventilators out of what not. Means all the automobile manufacturers started producing ventilators, doctors started producing ventilators, but ventilator is not a solution in COVID. It's a desperate measure, and 75% of people on ventilator die. What really saves lives is prone high flow nasal oxygen. So possibly that is something that we have, and I am proud that the whole world has agreed and we use this therapy more and more. How does a COVID patient recover? Now, normally there is infectivity from the patient gets contact on the first day. He starts becoming infective around 4th day of infection, and he stops being infective around 12th day from the contact. So 12 days infectivity and around 14 days of life cycle of COVID. Generally, after 12 to 14 days, COVID is not found in the swab or into the samples from the body we test in most of the cases, except patients who remain sick, continue to remain sick or deteriorate, where we send a second sample after 12 days or after 14 days. The second thing about recovery was antibody tests, which are now going on all around the world, and I think today, and I firmly believe that they are experimental. And I'm going to tell you some examples about this experimental status. In the US, where my friend is working in the hospital, they did antibody test for around 3,000 healthcare workers, because they thought that most of the healthcare workers in New York area would be positive for antibodies. And to their surprise, only 10% were positive. That means many people felt that they definitely had contracted the virus with mild symptoms. They did not show any antibodies. Another friend of mine who works in Sion Hospital, Mumbai, he was tested positive for antibody never had COVID-like symptoms, and after the antibody test, after 9 days, as the luck would have it, he developed COVID. So antibody tests, as of now, I would not call them bogus outright, but experimental outright. So they are not to be used for any clinical decision making. If somebody says that based on antibody, our COVID incidence is so much, is a false statement unless and until they are proven to be accurate. Right now they are false and they are being studied. Reinfection is something we are discussing for a long time. And there have been some examples from China and Dharavi where people died at the time of reinfection. So far, in our hospital, we have not seen a single reinfection. And also from the Western literature, from US and UK, we feel that the reinfection rate is low, probably as less as 2% or less. So reinfection is not a serious issue, but there are some long-term issues which we are discussing because COVID not only affects lungs, where we are thinking whether it will affect the lungs for a longer time, but also strokes, that is paralytic attacks, and other non-pulmonary manifestations of COVID, we are discussing for long-term issues. As of now, there is little clarity as to what will happen to COVID patients for next 2 or 3 or 4 years. I am not worried seriously at present. I would feel that those who are asymptomatic or minimally symptomatic did not need hospitalization, would sail through COVID and become 100% normal individuals again. Those who had a bad COVID, admitted in the ICU, had ventilation, might have some long-term issues. We need to study them. The next important thing at the time of recovery, during and after recovery, is Ayurveda and homeopathy. I personally do believe in Ayurveda and homeopathy, but I am not a fan. When I say I believe in Ayurveda and homeopathy, I believe that both of them work in selected situations. And I don't know why they are jumping with joy at the time of COVID. This is a new disease where even allopathy or modern science has not found anything other than oxygen in a significant manner so far. So why are homeopaths and Ayurveda claiming that we have found prevention of COVID or cure of COVID is something I absolutely don't accept. And I am taking interviews of discharged patients from Dinanath. So I took interview of 100 patients from Dinanath who were discharged with COVID. Out of them, 25 were taking arsenic album. So it is difficult to believe that homeopathy prevented their disease. So I called up our homeopath and told him that 25% were taking arsenic album. So he told me that that is the reason why they got mild disease. Then I called him that 3 of our patients who died were taking arsenic album. Then he told me that only 3 died because they were taking arsenic album, otherwise more would have died. So that is the status. You can't argue with them. You cannot convince an Ayurvedic or homeopathic practitioner to stay quiet for some time, do a research trial, and then only come forward. They come forward first and then they talk about research, which is a sad thing. I think they should do a research trial on a reasonable scale, publish their findings, have it vetted out by other people, have that similar trial done somewhere else, and then go to people saying that we have found a cure or prevention. My fear is that after you get over COVID, you had COVID, you recovered, you went home, you are going to fall prey to allopaths, ayurveds, and homeopaths alike, saying that now we tell you how to live after COVID or how to take your care of yourself after COVID. So the main thing against COVID is your own health and immunity. Unfortunately, that is the thing we are not practicing. What really saves us from COVID is our health. And our society has become so unhealthy that Boris Johnson said after he recovered from COVID that this is a not war against COVID, it's a war against lifestyle and war against fat. British and American people have become so obese. Indians have so much of diabetes and so much of hypertension and so much of heart diseases that our real enemy is our diseases. And we want to rely on Ayurveda and homeopathy and allopathy. We must rely on ourselves. And I think it is never too late. if you kind of improve your lifestyle, I'm sure that those of who are staying at home for last 3 months, your diabetes, hypertension must have improved in last 3 months. I'm absolutely sure about it. So the real thing here is no proof, no treatment. I don't know. I personally am of the opinion no proof, no drug. If you want to give me any drug, I am going to demand proof. And oxygen, vitamin D, I call them not as drugs, but that things which are naturally occurring around you. So these are the only two things which I am willing to accept at present. What did Dinanath Mangeshkar do when this COVID war started? I'm going to share a little bit because you read funny things on WhatsApp or in the newspaper. So first thing we did was we had two buildings. The front building, which we have completely dedicated to COVID. And our total strength for COVID patients there at present is 250. And in July, August, we are going to ramp it up to 450. So in July and August, if by bad luck COVID increases, there would be 450 patients at a time admitted in Dinanath Mangeshkar Hospital. We have a completely separate staff to take care of COVID patients. After attending their COVID duty, they are given a leave or a paid holiday in which they cool off at home and then they come back and join duty in the new building. And the new building staff on rotation goes to the old building. So absolute segregation between staff and building for COVID and non-COVID patients. And I am absolutely proud to say that we have done 1100 surgeries in last 3 months and no person died of COVID. We have not tested them for RT-PCR. We have done 1100 surgeries, many of them fractures, cancers, joint replacements, cataracts, spine surgeries. We have done everything. We started small. In month of March, we stopped surgeries and every week we added as our confidence went on. And now we have experience of 1100 surgeries with no fatality or problem because of COVID. So again, my sincere request is that there is no need to test for RT-PCR or COVID before surgeries. They are safe if you take safety precautions seriously. We have a steering committee for COVID decisions. We have a surgical and obstetric safety committee to decide which patients should be operated. And every week we meet to discuss COVID and non-COVID cases. Our life or probably our heart is in our mouth when we talk about these cases, but with God's grace, so far, so very good. And what we are doing is we are using universal COVID precautions for all our cases. That means I firmly believe that every patient who comes to me is COVID. And my only prevention or precaution is aerosol. So a mask or a face shield are the two most important weapons that I have. My PPE and my shoes and my gumboots are not my weapon. My only weapon is my face shield, my mask and my eye cover. If I do this properly, in Dinanath we have 4,500 health workers and so far only 18 have tested positive for COVID or had developed symptoms. Out of these 18 people, 16 have already joined their duties back. So while I am hearing from many hospitals across the country that their staff has disappeared or is not willing to work, in Dinanath, we are giving paid leaves to our staff because they don't want to go home. So we give a half paid leave. That means if they take leave for 15 days, we give them 7.5 days salary. Or if they take leave for 1 month, we give them 15 days salary. And we are happy and they are happy. So this half paid leave on a large scale is being practiced in Dinanath. How many patients are we treating? We have 170 patients of COVID in the front building and we have 400 non-COVID patients in the building which is behind, specialty building. So I am absolutely kind of proud to say that we can win this war. So my title of this topic today was COVID is a winnable war. How did we do it? We have a simulation center on our 14th floor in the new building where COVID simulation is done and every member of the staff is trained to handle COVID patient. So may it be a biomedical worker, a sanitization staff, a nurse, a ward boy, a senior doctor, all of them must undergo training, and only after training and certification they can work in the COVID or non-COVID area. And we don't kind of mentally differentiate between these two areas. So these are the numbers. Now it is of course crossed 500. This was 30th of May. Now we have already crossed 500. Discharged already 320 patients. Our ICU has already crossed 150 patients. And now the healthcare workers so far are 16 total, 18 totally. 16 have joined duty again. What is the road ahead? Now I have almost talked about COVID and also talked about Dinanath. I am going to talk a little bit about the social road or the road for Pune and general world. We are now entering the second phase. This is my slide from the March presentation. This I presented on 24th of March. Now this is July now. So in July, there will be peak of COVID cases filling all the hospital beds in Pune, Mumbai and Delhi, and only emergency procedures will take place. What I have told our doctors in Dinanath is to finish off whatever surgeries they want to finish before first week of July. Once the monsoon comes in full force, the fever will come in full force, and possibly we will be pushed back to only doing emergency procedures and COVID procedures. Remember that in Italy and New York, they even converted their operation rooms into ICU beds. And I feel that as responsible hospitals in Pune, we will be also be reaching that point somewhere between July and August. After the September is over, between October and December, COVID and normal medical work will start side by side. Patients and doctors would accept this new reality. And in general, the new normal life will be seen only after Diwali. So I would say that if you are planning to go somewhere, planning to start something, planning to start working, planning to start school, planning to start college, trying to send your child to a college, all of this is going to start in October. UK and US and France and Israel, they started their schools and colleges and they had to shut down them again. France started schools and in 2 weeks time there was 20% positivity in French school, so now they are thinking of shutting it down. Israel started their schools, in 2 weeks time 7% positivity, they are thinking of shutting it down. So possibly we will become a mature society by October and then hope to reach the new normal state. These are the COVID barriers or our staff who are there. Now these are the three scenarios. Number one is an optimistic scenario, which most of us are on the optimistic bend of mind, where a miracle drug will come or a magic cure will come or a vaccine will come before end of September. In which case there will be 1 million deaths in the world, and by December or Jan, we will be back to our previous world order. More likely than that is the realistic scenario where on and off lockdowns. Now we are in the first unlockdown. I have a feeling that in July we will face lockdown number 5 and in August maybe lockdown number 6. So this will go on and off, but we will hopefully become better in hygiene, better in social distancing, better in mask usage, better on focusing on severe and non-ventilated growth. Drugs I have already said. I personally feel it will take 18 months, 1.5 years before a real vaccine comes. In such a scenario, there would be 1 million deaths worldwide, which is big in a way and which is not so great in a way. In a pessimistic scenario, like Sweden, where they are saying we are waiting for herd immunity, 40% of world population will be infected and deaths could be in excess of 5 to 6 crores. I hope that in a modern world, we don't reach this pessimistic or herd immunity scenario, but nothing is impossible. A little bit for your economy. This is a doctor's view on what is going to happen to economy. You don't know about medicine and I don't know about economy. So on both sides, we are blind people sitting. My view is that consumer goods, chemical industry, pharma industry, infrastructure, television, and e-commerce like Amazon, Facebook, Flipkart and whatever, they will do very well during this COVID period. Those who are into education, healthcare, automobile, IT industry, agriculture and electronics will be hit, will falter and will recover. And those who are into aviation industry, tourism, hotel industry, real estate, construction, banking, finance, events, sports, oil and gas, they will find a long and difficult road ahead. Eventually, whether you are in green, yellow or red, everybody finally will stand true and win this war. But if you are forewarned that something bad is coming your way, you are forearmed. So healthcare, which is now in the yellow zone, is warned that bad days for healthcare are there, because till the time COVID is there, your healthcare so-called industry will never be the same till the time COVID goes away. So you are going to get hit, you are going to falter, and hopefully you will come out strong. Some opportunities are there. I'm not going to talk about all the opportunities, only on the last opportunity, which is called as rise of minimalism. We have taken the word to maximalism, eating maximum number of animals, eating maximum number of exotic things, traveling maximum number of exotic destinations, using maximum number of vehicles, doing maximum number of conferences, and going to maximum number of restaurants. I have never seen the restaurants, the likes in Pune, anywhere else in the world. So we have to turn back to some minimalism, and I hope we find out value of our home and our minimalism because of COVID. If we do that, if we rediscover our health, I think we have won this war. Because the real war, not only so much against COVID, but it is also against our own policies in life, our own lifestyle, our own way of functioning. 2020 will be remembered as a year of self-preservation. So the motto for this year is just preserve yourself, your health and your life. 2021 will be the year of revival. You will struggle, but adversity will bring out the best in you. And we are preparing ourselves as a hospital. You prepare yourselves as an industry to come out, and come out you will. I will end my lecture with a thank you and a simple message that be positive, don't be paranoid. COVID is going to visit everybody, but we are going to beat this virus. It is just too small. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Doctor. If it's okay to take few questions.
Yeah.
So we'll take few questions, but before that, I'll have a couple of comments before the question. I think these comments kind of sum up comments of many. So I'll just read 3 comments. Many thanks to Dr. Kelkar. I appreciate your seriousness in conveying the details and making us more aware about the subject. Second one, a comprehensive, realistic, scientific, rational presentation about COVID-19. Third one, thank you so much, sir, for such a nice and practical presentation. I won't read all. I just wanted to say thank you by reading the messages as is. And now we'll go to the questions.
I will answer some of the things which have come to me.
Right, please.
One was about BCG injection at birth.
That's right.
So I took interview of 100 patients who were discharged from Dinanath. 75% had taken BCG vaccination at birth. I checked their mark also on their shoulder. So BCG is apparently not offering any immunity against COVID. And this new trial of recombinant BCG, I am not excited about. The second thing is about vitamin C tablets. The answer is I don't know. Vitamin C is generally good for recovery from sports and things like that. I personally have no knowledge of its relation to immunity, as I have knowledge of vitamin D. I would at the moment rely on D more than C, but C is good, it is water soluble, no harm done. If you eat more, it just goes out through urine. So believe in anything which is not harmful, which is not a drug. Vitamin C is fine with me. Vitamin D3 tablet frequency somebody has asked. It is to be taken 60,000 strength as it is called. It is to be taken once a week for 4 to 5 weeks, and then once every 3 weeks for the remaining year till the time COVID is there. So it is once every 3 weeks afterwards, and initially once every week for 4 to 5 weeks. Reinfection, as I have already told you, reinfection, we are not sure, probably less than 2%, 5%, but very low. Antibody testing is inaccurate, so I won't elaborate on that again, but I have reasonably good first-hand knowledge that antibody testing is not reliable today. Herd immunity takes almost more than a year and a half to get there. So for India to get herd immunity, it will be September 2021. That's not the best path to travel. This lifestyle change, I'm not talking about only about COVID. COVID has just shown us what a small virus can do. So there would be more viruses and more illnesses around afterwards also. So our lifestyle improvement is a wake-up call. If we take this wake-up call seriously, I'm sure we will come out as winners. Socializing, eating out in restaurants, religious, political gatherings and all must stop at least for next 2 months, at least July, August. In end of August, September, we will take a stock of things. If things are good, monsoon goes away, viral fevers go away, we can think about socialization at that time. At present, in the monsoon season, I feel it is very dangerous. Hydroxychloroquine should be given with zinc. Yes, it is always given with zinc. Hydroxychloroquine for all our patients who are getting treated is always given with zinc. Thank you. I had not put it because this is not a medical lecture.
I have a couple of questions then.
Sure, go ahead.
Thank you. So, the one is, if there is this whole thing about community transmission, what's your take on this, and where do we stand in India or Pune, Mumbai especially?
I think I am not an epidemiologist, but I think when you cannot trace the source of infection, I call it a community transmission. Now, for many of the previous patients admitted in Dinanath, at least 25% of patients, we absolutely cannot trace the source. And that is why I feel community transmission has occurred. Our government, I don't know why it is trying to say that it has not occurred. I think it has occurred and it has already penetrated. And the only reason why we continue to say no is because we are not aware of the true size of the epidemic. Our testing is limited, our resources are limited, and hence our numbers are also underreported or limited. That is why we are saying it is not community transmission yet. My opinion, yes, we are from the 15th of May onwards, we are well into community transmission zone.
Thank you, doctor. The next one is, how do you compare this vis-a-vis influenza, which also many Punekars have seen?
Means influenza, normal influenza, there is a vaccine against influenza. The senior high-risk people normally take this vaccine, and during this pandemic also they should continue to take this vaccine. But influenza mortality in India has been very small. In US, this mortality is quoted at 3 to 5%. In India, really it is 1% or less. So influenza in India is mild because we have many virus friends. But COVID in India is not so mild. It is like everywhere else in the world. In Dinanath, the mortality is 7%. So we are not taking it lightly.
Thank you, sir. The next one is about diabetes. Is it only the uncontrolled diabetes that is prone to COVID-19, or all diabetes prone to COVID-19?
No, diabetics are not prone to COVID-19. Diabetic person is not at all prone to COVID-19. There is a risk to diabetic person when COVID occurs. Now, when this risk is determined by uncontrolled or controlled diabetes, and from the interviews that I am taking and from the serious patient in the ICU and the world literature, we have concluded that uncontrolled diabetes is a pretty serious risk factor if you get COVID infection.
Thank you, doctor. Just last 3-4 questions.
Yeah.
How does one know, you did mention about the 5th day to 9th day. How does a layman know that when did the day one start to know when is the 5th day?
From the index case in the house, probably.
Right, got it.
Probably.
Sure, sir. The next one is, you did mention about the importance of oxygen cylinder and concentrate. And you did answer this question to an extent, but let me ask this. What are the supply constraints on availability of these cylinders or concentrates today, and what could be in the near future, if any?
Means from what I am hearing from Mumbai, where they have purchased lot of concentrators, the supply is quite good. And this is also a business opportunity for people in oxygen business. So they are doing quite well at such times. So I would not be seriously worried about shortage of oxygen.
Right. Thank you, sir. Just last couple of questions. There is one just now we got. Will there be resurgence of swine flu in July, August as well? Do you recommend swine flu vaccine for everybody, for all?
I am not very kind of a fan of swine flu vaccine because it started with H1N1. Now it is almost H5N5 kind of situation. So the swine flu vaccine virus is mutating very fast. So taking swine flu vaccine is not a good idea. General flu vaccine, which we called as pentaflu or whatever, I don't know, there are many names in the market. So the flu vaccine is a good idea. Not the swine flu vaccine is not a great idea because it's a mutating virus. And that is also my fear about corona also.
Thank you, sir. Now, last question from my end, and then I'll be requesting Mr. Bhargava and Mr. Mehta to comment before we conclude. So the last one is nothing to do about corona per se, but are you okay for us to share the video recording on YouTube? That's the question of many people.
Just check that I have not said anything controversial.
Right. We'll edit in that case. We'll wait for a day or so and then we'll put it up.
I don't remember having said anything controversial because generally I am a careful man. But still, just have a look at it, somebody, and if anything doesn't appear controversial, you can go ahead and put it.
Thank you so much, sir. I think I'll just leave it there. And I'll now request Mr. Pradeep Bhargava, the president of MCCI, and then Mr. Sudhir Mehta, if they have they would like to comment before we conclude.
Thank you, Prashant. Once again, with folded hands, sir, thank you very much. This is one of the most sort of positive conversation on what is generating negative fears in us. Thank you so much. Sir, just one request at the end. You people, your fraternity, health is very important for the rest of the society's health. Would very strongly recommend, sir, the types of messages, the type of decorum, the type of conduct that your hospital under your leadership has done. Just spread this infection of yours conduct into other hospitals, not only in Pune but elsewhere, because sir, what we need is you people are the ones who we look at. I mean, you are our hope, sir. You are the people who, because we don't know what's going to happen to the virus, but at least we know if it happens, we are in safe hands in that sense. So just to request that, sir, please, with your medical biradari, unko bhi isi cheez ka ehsaas dilaiye, so that they also get ready and are able to do it. Thank you very much, sir, from quite literally, because I as individual and many of us have come out very enlightened about this. You're demystified what is a very mysterious phenomena around us. You have unraveled a lot of things that we thought that there do's and don'ts. Appreciate, sir. Thank you very much once again, and we really, really want to acknowledge. And good luck and good wishes to you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'll now request, before I request Mr. Sudhir Mehta, a quick one. Of course, most of you would know that the whole Pune platform for COVID response, through which we could do our own tiny little contribution. Many of you are associated with it and very, very active contributors, as I can see the names. The one man who has been leading it from front is Sudhir, who has been very, very active at all of this. So thank you so much for all of that from all of us, Sudhir, as well as thank you so much for bringing Dr. Kelkar to do this interaction with us. I'll now hand it over to you, Sudhir.
Thank you, Prashant, and thank you, Dr. Kelkar. I think Pune is indeed a very, very special town, and I think we've proven this in the past few months, because I think the Pune model is something which now is being looked at in the rest of the country. And I think this is happening because we are a unique city where all of the different constituents, which includes the government, which includes all private hospitals, government hospitals, industry, political leaders, have all come together. And I think the biggest thing that has happened in this war is that we started with the resolution that we will defeat this. And I think till now, the level of cooperation that has been there between all the hospitals in Pune, between the government, the private sector, and I think this is the reason why we've been able to avoid a lot of the things which are happening in other cities. On behalf of PPCR, we are indeed grateful to Dr. Kelkar. He is in the front lines. I think he's one of the most brilliant doctors in the country, but most importantly, I think he does it with heart. And I think the hospital has proven to be one where people come back and they come back with a smile. And even in this, which is a difficult few months ahead, I think we are all thankful for the city of Pune for all the effort that he has done. And thanks again. And I think this will be very useful for other people to also listen in. So I don't think there is anything at all here which is controversial. I think this is very realistic. And I think all of us deserve to know what's the actual situation so that we can take the best prevention possibilities. So thank you again, Dr. Kelkar, and we look forward to working with you as closely as we've done in the past few months.
I'll send a copy of the slides to Sudhir Mehtaji, so which you can then share wherever you would like.
We'll do that. Thank you so much, Dr. Kelkar, and thank you so much, each one of you. We look forward to have another opportunity sometime soon to hear you again. Many, many thanks.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye now. We are concluding the session.